Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure, a real pleasure to be with you once again as we tape this particular program on Tuesday, December the 10th, 1991. It's a series of programs that we've had for over a year where we try to examine and analyze our status and our wherewithal as a people and as a nation in a troublesome world, our particular bent or propensities to try to analyze where we are at and why we're here and where we should be going and how we should get there and what the situation is and should be in terms of our standing as a people and as a nation vis-a-vis ourselves and vis-a-vis the world. We have made these programs on the basis of analyzing the historical background, for example, or to understand the contradictions sometimes within which and by which we seem to conduct ourselves, and the hypocrisies that oftentimes are involved in the failure on the part of Democrats and Republicans as political parties to function creatively in our society. A recent editorial in the Hartford Current stated that Democratic State Chairman John Droney really did not do the things that he should have done as state chairman of the Democratic Party in the state of Connecticut with respect to tax reform, with respect to seeing to it that things are properly gauged and looked at, creatively. He was undertaken and told that the things that were done by the Democratic Party over the years were not as creative as it should have been. In answer to that editorial by the Hartford Current, Peter Kelly, who's a member of the Democratic National Committee, criticized the Current for that kind of criticism of John Droney in terms that it was really Ronald Reagan's presidency in the 80s that has really brought us to the economic morass that we are in today, and that Ronald Reagan's extremely conservative policies and programs really landed us and are landing us where we are in this particular time in our historical period. Well, I disagree. I disagree with Mr. Kelly. I disagree with John Droney. I think that the Hartford Current, I disagree with them too, in terms of not completely analyzing, the situation, properly. First place, the Democratic Party in the state of Connecticut should have undertaken basic reforms and changes because they control the state legislature. They did not do this, and one of the reasons why we're in the morass that we're in is because people like Mr. Droney as the Democratic State Chairman and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, for that matter, really did not do the things that they should have done by undertaking an analysis and projecting into the future to ascertain where we are at. This state is too defense industry oriented. And when there are cuts in defense or when Cold Wars are over, then we have to relegate ourselves to continuous defense spending and a war economy in this state, all the more when the war economy is not necessary because of the end of the Cold War. Then what do? There wasn't any prophetic leadership, in other words. We just went along with the status quo and just plugged along and gambled along, hoping somehow that things would be okay in terms of the future and in terms of what would happen. And that's not always the situation, as we have found out. Now, at the same time, President Reagan was at fault. President Reagan, through his supply-side economics, through the programs that he undertook, he cut the taxes, thereby helping the rich, and the rich became richer as a result. With respect to the entire situation involving tremendous increases in the defense budget, which is not labor-intensive because fewer and fewer people are needed in order to produce more sophisticated weaponry. And then there were cuts to the aid that was given to the states and to the cities. And then with the recession that has come in and the economic dislocations that have taken place, you see a situation where with a cut to the aid to the states, with cuts that were made to the cities all over America, including the state of Connecticut, with the rich becoming richer, with the scandals with respect to the savings and loan, with the junk bonds in Wall Street, with the bank failures that have taken place, with estimated $1 trillion in order to bail out their savings and loan, tremendous burdens have been placed on the American taxpayer. But I disagree with Brother Kelly, because the Reagan economic proposals were supported by the Democrats in the Congress. The Democrats controlled the Congress of the United States. The President Reagan made recommendations. The Congress adopted those recommendations, basically. So you have a Republican domestic policy. You can't excoriate and blame President Reagan when the Democrats in the Congress went along with him. And you had Tip O'Neill, the head of the Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives in the early 80s. Do you remember? We don't want to criticize President Reagan because he's too popular. And you heard Brother Foley, who's the head of the Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives, in the late 1980s, after President Bush became president, saying, we don't want to criticize President Bush. He's too popular. Well, what are you there for as a loyal opposition party, supposedly? So you can't just criticize President Reagan. What I'm saying is a plague on both their houses, Democrats and Republicans. And furthermore, Brothers Kelly and Brothers Droney undertook in their career with respect to political affiliation and propensity and ideological bent, a Southern strategy. They were in cahoots with the Southern boll weevils, who sometimes are more conservative than President Reagan was. They advocated support for Albert Gore of Tennessee as President of the United States. They liked Sam Nunn, who said we got to be strong on security. In other words, increase the defense budget. The Southerners especially were saying 1988, in order for us to win, we got to be strong on national security. No prophetic or visionary outlook at all about what was happening in the Soviet Union, about the portents for ending the Cold War. No leadership at all, no intellectual acumen to comprehend and understand. But Brothers Droney and Kelly supported this Southern strategy. So why are you blaming President Reagan? A plague on all their houses, politically speaking, because the Democrats supported the Republicans. We have a Republican domestic policy in this country, and we have had since Truman's time, and Senator Vandenberg, the Republican, Democrat and Republican, a bipartisan foreign policy. So where is the choice to the American people? Now the Democrats are saying we got to emphasize the domestic program, domestic policy. Too long we've been involved with foreign policy. You cannot undertake any constructive action on a domestic policy unless you change your foreign policy, because the defense budget voted on by both Democrats and Republicans this year, not 1988 when Bush won, not in 1980 when Reagan won, this year, still bipartisan. Both Democrats and Republicans voted for the same budget. Defense budget, $291 billion, $291 billion, which means that the Cold War is still on. The Cold War may objectively be over, but our budget, federal budget, is predicated on the proposition that the Cold War is still going on. The Cold War syndrome, The Cold War mentality, first concocted by President Truman after the Second World War, and Republicans as Senator Vandenberg, still prevails. Now look at some of the hypocrisies that are involved in the conduct of Americans' foreign affairs and domestic affairs, both blamed on Republicrats, Democrats and Republicans, who are reluctant to change, who don't have the capacity for vision and prophetic political outlook. There are more changes going on in the Soviet Union than there are in this country. We are very status quo-ish, very conservative. Connecticut is called the land of steady habits, no changes. We revolt against change. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a historical period, not started by the Bolsheviks in 1917, whose roots go back several hundred years. We are in the midst of a world revolution where change is the order of the day. What we have done as a people and as a nation, we have reacted against those changes. Western world has reacted against those changes. Rather than undertake change, we became reactionary as Western civilization. Example, the home of the Catholic Church, Italy, became fascist as a reaction against bringing about basic changes. We went to the right, extra conservative, because we were afraid of Bolshevism, of change, and because we concluded that any change must be Bolshevik. The home of the Protestant Church, Germany, went Nazi. We reacted against the changes. The home of the Orthodox Church, in a real sense, Greece, became fascist under Metaxas between the First and the Second World Wars. The Eastern Orthodox Church, as personified by Greece, became fascist. The Roman Catholic Church, headquartered in Rome, in Italy, became fascist. And Nazi Germany became Nazi under Hitler, the home of the Protestant Church. And you had the Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa that said it is Christian to have apartheid. It is Christian to have a small minority of whites control blacks and not give them any rights at all. The Dutch Reformed Church, instead of understanding the revolutionary impetus whose seeds were sown centuries ago, by whom? By us. The Western world started the world revolution that we are in. What was Karl Marx? He was a Western philosopher, wasn't he? The French Revolution, 1789, before Karl Marx, before Bolshevism, liberty, equality, fraternity, where the ideas of nationalism were spread. The Glorious Revolution in England, 1688. The Magna Carta by England. Hey, and a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The Bill of Rights, this country, we set in motion. And you know, after the Second World War, as an example, in Indonesia, what transpired? In Indonesia, the people were saying as they tried to throw off the yoke of Dutch colonialism, they were going in the streets with signs, of the people, by the people, for the people. We then sent guns to the Dutch to put down the revolutionary impetus of the people who wanted freedom from Holland. And as I said before, the hypocrisies that have been perpetrated. President Bush was in the Ukraine several weeks ago. He spoke at Kiev. At that time, he said, I'm against the Ukraine becoming an independent country. Basically, I'm in favor of the Soviet Union remaining as a union under the leadership of Gorbachev. When Ukrainian American leaders met with Bush, President Bush, just a short time ago, because, in my opinion, President Bush wanted to get Ukrainian American political support in the United States, he switched gears. He said, I will recognize the Ukraine if they vote for independence in the referendum that they had. He switched within a month's period of time for, in my opinion, domestic political reasons. Now, I'm not saying he should have switched or not have switched. He should have been for Ukrainian independence or against Ukrainian independence. But don't say one thing and then a month later do another thing. Don't speak with forked tongue in terms of what is going on. Now you got President Aristide, another example of hypocrisy, who was kicked out by the Haitian military. If the Haitian military were pro-communist and they kicked out President Aristide, we'd be probably sending troops to Haiti. Or when there are right-wing dictators, military dictators or fascist dictators, that's okay. As long as they're either non-communist or anti-communist, then we'll support them, even though they're dictators. Well, how about the human rights, Mr. President? Well, as long as they're against Bolshevism, what do we care if they deny human rights? And look what we did in Somalia. Somalia is being rent. There are sub-clans within a general clan of people around the southern part of Somalia in the capital of Mogadishu. Formerly Italian Somaliland, the north was British Somaliland. The north is broken away after the dictator body was overthrown by the United Liberation Front of the Somali people. We had supported Bari, one of the most ruthless dictators, loved to bomb villages up in the north, like Edingawa and Hargeisa, to kill women and children. We supported the anti-government group in Mozambique. Their specialty was killing women and children, the Renamo. We supported Mobutu in Zaire, ruthless dictator. Why? Because he was against the communist regime in Angola, which is next door. And therefore we tolerated his dictatorial methodologies and torture, because he was an anti-communist. And what happened to human rights? Oh, if the communists violate human rights, we're against that, we're for human rights. But when our friends, the dictators we have supported since the Second World War, violate human rights, as long as they're anti-communist, that's all right. That's fine. That's okay. How about Myanmar, formerly known as Burma? They had a free election there. The party won. The military took over. We're still sending help to Myanmar. We're still helping them. That's okay. That's all right. As long as they're non-communists. See, the Cold War mentality still exists. It's gripped Congress with the defense budget. You cannot undertake changes in domestic policies and programs unless you change your foreign policy. You cannot help the states and the cities of America with revenue sharing and other programs, basically to overcome the problems that exist in this country, in education, the infrastructure, cleaning the environment, fighting drugs, all these programs, housing, unemployment compensation, public works programs. You cannot do it if you have the same foreign policy that you have had. Because whenever the Democrats have suggested recently for a particular domestic program to help the economy, you know what President Bush says? We haven't got the money. And we can't break the budget agreement that we concocted, Republicans concocted, which says no cuts in defense spending until 1993. No cuts in defense spending. You're locked in because the Cold War mentality still persists. It is found in the federal Cold War budget. Cold War budget. In my opinion, it was essential for this country to help Russia remain free, with freedom, with democracy, but economically viable in terms of a United States of Russia, and to help Eastern Europe. If for no other reason, if the only reason you give is to help us economically, let's say it's a selfish reason, we should have done that. The people want housing there. They want economic development there. And if we help with those efforts, it will help our economy. But if you produce guns and tanks only, if your manufacturing capacity has gone down in this country, then the slack is taken up by countries like Germany and Japan. And I don't blame our former enemies of the Second World War. I don't blame Germany and blame Japan. I blame ourselves. We have no leadership, neither from the Democrats and neither from the Republicans. The Republicrats are at fault. Now, I said some of these things when I was at Amherst College up in Massachusetts, sometimes called the Little Harvard, small liberal arts college up at Amherst, Mass, where also is located the University of Massachusetts in the town of Amherst, Mass, where Amherst College is in the town of Amherst, Mass, where in Northampton, a few miles away, Smith College, and a little farther away, Mount Holyoke College. Top colleges and universities. I said some of these things at that time when the Truman Doctrine was being enacted in 1947 by the Congress of the United States as enunciated by President Truman. The doctrine of military containment. In other words, the proposition is, you don't like an idea like communism, kill it with bullets. Like the Romans did. No more Christianity, because the Romans used military force and force to stop the Christians, right? We don't have any more Christianity today because the Romans stopped Christianity by force. Feed the Christians to the lions in the Colosseum. That would stop Christianity, right? Did Metternich stop nationalism in the 19th century after the Napoleonic Wars? When he sent his armies into Spain, into Italy, into Poland, to stop nationalism, which arose as a result of the French Revolution? Did he stop nationalism and ism, the ideology of nationalism? We don't have any more nationalism today, right? Because Metternich used force to stop communism. Has communism been stopped as a result of military containment undertaken by Truman since the Second World War? You say, well, Russia has broken up. But the idea of communism still exists in Cuba. It exists in some African countries. It exists in China. The idea hasn't really been stopped by the use of force. Russia may have broken up as a result of the Cold War impetus, but maybe we're breaking up also. As David Staunton, the economic advisor to President Reagan, said about 2 months ago, he said it was touch and go as to who would collapse first, the Soviet Union or the United States. The Soviet Union collapsed first economically, but are we next? Why? Because of imperial overstretch. Because we're the world policemen. Now, I'm not arguing that we should become isolationistic. That's not my argument. Never been my argument. I'm a person, a citizen of the world. Never been my argument. All I'm saying is, when you do get involved with the world, understand the world, understand Africa, understand Latin America, understand the Middle East, understand the Far East, so that your policies will be geared to the realities as they culturally and psychologically and economically and socially and ideologically and politically exist in different parts of the world. Don't react against the forces of history. The problem in Central America and South America isn't just communism. It is because we have failed to give an alternative to the status quo. You can't be at Copacabana Beach in Brazil and Rio de Janeiro, plush beach, beautiful people swimming, and you look up and you see in the hills the hovels where the poor are living, the poor and the destitute. Yes, when you look from the beach up, not toward the ocean where the wealthy and the rich look, but look back at the hovels and the cliffs where people living uncaved. It's those people, the revolution of rising expectations, that want something better for themselves. And if we as a democracy, and if the Western world is not going to give those people the hope and the faith and the love and the understanding and the compassion, then they're going to go to communism or any other ism that may exist, because we have failed. Don't blame the communists. Don't blame any other ism. We have failed because we have become a status quo power. We want things as they are, and we're against any changes. We refuse to become independent energy-wise. We want to depend on oil in the Middle East, and we're ready to go to war. Turkey violated many more United Nations resolutions than Iraq did. And yet we do nothing about Turkey when they invaded Cyprus and still control 40% of the island, the Turkish army. See, this is what I mean by how we relegated ourselves to hypocrisy, to speaking with forked tongue, for not comprehending and understanding. Our educational system is disarray. We depend on television to give us a 1-minute capsule of the news. We don't like to read anymore. See, we like to watch on TV what's going on. We have cut ourselves off from the realities as they exist, and therefore we are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past because we have learned nothing. We have learned nothing from that past. And therefore, we are marking ourselves for extinction and decline and fall. You say you're a prophet of doom and gloom. Yes, I am. Because that's the reality as I see it. What I'm going to tell you, good news? I'm going to tell you good news. Where are the good news? The American people know this because they have good common sense. Their feelings tell them. They're waiting for leaders and leadership with vision and projected into the future in terms of concrete proposals. And if we don't come up